What if Apple owned the internet? Just imagine the internet being privatized and a private company owning it. They would make the experience amazing, and it would be like the App Store. They have design guidelines and they have to get approved. Imagine if the raw internet behaved the same way. Just imagine as a user what the internet would look like.
Welcome to the Bias for Action podcast with your host, Michael Fang. With a PhD in applied physics focusing on quantum computing and a number of years in long-distance running, I hope to give listeners a chance to go behind the scenes of high performers across a wide range of disciplines and perspectives. Uncovering the mindset and habits of those who strive to be the best will help you improve your life and accomplish your goals with actionable advice. On today's episode, we have Dustin Diaz. Dustin is a startup co-founder, front-end web developer, photographer, and runner. After attending Sacramento State with a full-ride scholarship for running in 800 meters, Dustin found his way into tech through web development in the early 2000s. Since then, he has become an early contributor to notable companies such as Yahoo, Google, Twitter, where he built the tweet button, and Medium, where he built the editor. His startup, Agent, aims to be a better way to book models and safely connects talent with clients. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Dustin. So yeah, Dustin, you grew up in San Diego, but you eventually went to school at Sac State. And the reason you went to Sac State for school is because you got a scholarship for running in 800 meters.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into running and what that special 800-meter distance meant to you and why it got you into Sac State.
Yeah, okay. Getting into running, it's one of those things you discover that it's a gift or a talent. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's something you think like, hey, I'm good at this. I wasn't really good at anything else. I had very few friends, not because I don't think I wasn't friendly or I couldn't make friends. It's just maybe a little bit of that. But we also moved around a lot, and I was always at a new school. In PE class, physical education class, around 6th or 7th grade, at least it was for me. And you realize, oh, I'm winning the lap every day, or I'm faster playing the kickball game or whatever. When it came to like playing baseball, I was running the bases the fastest. In the rare occasion that I actually hit the ball, By the time I got to 8th grade, I was told that I was pretty close to the school record, which I believe was like a 5:28 mile, and I got it down to a 5:23 mile. Segueing into high school, I just realized, I'm going to just stick to this running thing. And so I joined the cross country team. That turned into a track team type of thing. As a freshman, and during that track season, I dropped my 800 time down to 2 minutes. I was our league champion, and that went on to city finals that I didn't get to run because I failed an English class, and my dad didn't let me go to the finals. So that was kind of a bummer. Getting closer to that senior year of running, I had dropped my time down to a 152. That led into a lot of schools showing interest. That was fun. I didn't get much faster in college. It only dropped by another second. Unfortunately, I think our coach ran us to the ground, and I felt like we were constantly injured, and it was not a fun experience. I really regret. I don't know. Let's not get into regrets. I just wish I had perhaps a different coaching path or whatever. Always you learn from all those things, but it is what it is.
Right. With all that running, you got into Sac State, and you also wanted to qualify for Olympic trials, right? I think that was, what year was that?
That was in 2004 in Sacramento at the school that I went to. And that was known news prior to 2000. I think they generally know the Olympic trial venue at least more than, about 6 to 8 years in advance. I think the bidding happens, for the next 3 venues, I think, in advance, unless things change. But Sacramento had already won its bid. They had already laid down its new track. It was like a new $1 million track, and that was definitely one of the motivating factors of me choosing that school. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to go to the place where they're going to eventually hold the trials. And if I progress along enough, I'm a 17-year-old who's already won 152. By the time 2004 comes, I'll be 24. I'll be a hometown favorite. Maybe not a favorite, but I'll be a hometown person that they can root for. And so, yeah, I kind of had it played out in my head, as that timeline. I would have been out of school if I graduated in 4 years, which I didn't. None of that really went to plan. When I was 22, which would have been my senior year, and it was going to be red-shirted, so it's called. Anyone not familiar with the term red shirt in college, it's when you get to apply a year of eligibility toward another, as long as you're still in school and you have your, academics up to par. Late winter, I had a collapsed lung just as I came into the new year. Just as I was starting to recover from that, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and then sort of dropped off my training entirely. I told my coach that news early on, and so it was going to take like several months of basically detraining and doing nothing, which was a huge shift in the way I was used to college. I ran all the time, so doing nothing at all was a major change in my entire college life. I finally was able to recover around July, and I trained, all of July, August, and September, coming back into school in September. I remember walking into the office like, hey, coach, I'm in great shape. I'm probably in the best fitness and best shape of my life, in my career. Let's do it. I'm ready to go in the fall. He's like, I haven't heard from you. I don't know what happened. I didn't get any updates. I mean, I assumed lots of things, but I assumed like people know I'm not going to just give up. I've recovered from other injuries in the past. So I was like, I'm not going to let this get me down. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger type of thing. And he's like, yeah, I've already given away your scholarship to like these 3 new freshmen. So we don't have any funds left. And I'm like, well, how do we make this happen? Like, I'm ready to go. I'm one of the top runners on the team at this point, in my best shape. I was the team captain the year prior, but there were no funds, and I can't run without these funds. Not to make it sound like a boohoo sob story, like, college kid has to get an actual job at this point, but it does make it hard to go to school and get a job and run at the same time, at least at that level, not to say that it hasn't been done, but I think the amount of time and effort that I needed to work and go to school, it just wasn't going to lend itself toward running. So I stopped running entirely at 22, and took another 2 years to graduate. So I graduated when I was 24.
So you recovered from your cancer. You were, I assume, doing some training in the background to get back to the best shape of your life. So you were running probably before you approached your coach again and say, hey, can I have my spot back?
Yeah.
And so did you walk out of that office that day and just never ran again?
Yeah, I didn't go back to training after that. I just remember thinking, I need to get a job like right now. So I got a job as a janitor at the student union, wiping down tables and cleaning bathrooms. Then eventually got a second job at the student paper. I was an assistant opinion editor, and that turned into the online editor. So I maintained the website and whatnot, and then that kind of that sparked more of my interest in tech and building websites and applications and whatnot. So, and that is what that is.
I mean, you graduated in 2004. Mm-hmm. You took a year before joining Yahoo in 2005. Mm-hmm. What happened really between, walking out of your coach's office as an athlete and then walking into Yahoo as a, front-end engineer?
Sure. I started a blog, a JavaScript blog, and I was working at a startup at 24. The moment I got out of school, just writing PHP, building websites for professional athletes. That in no way had any tie toward like athletics or anything. That was a coincidence, I feel like, that I landed a job that happened to have been in sports. It was called Athlete Web Services. So they were the original AWS, so to speak. And then when AWS launched, a lot of people confused our company with that. They're like, you guys are going to have to change your name.
Wow.
So I got to build BrettFavre.com, Tayshaun Prince, a couple 49ers. I got to do DinaCaster.com. And these were just like simple marketing pages, like fan sites where we would reach out to an agent my boss would reach out to their agents and say like, hey, we have these website packages. You want to have an online presence, we'll build your site for you and create like a fan mail inbox for you and a way to engage with your fans type of thing. So it's nothing special. We were super underpaid. And
well, this wasn't too long after the .com boom either, right?
Yeah, this was literally 2003 and 4 or 4 and 5. When did I join Yahoo?
2005.
2005. So this was 2003 and a half or so. So I was only there for about a year and a half, and I was blogging a lot then, and I had a podcast back then, and I was kind of just building my presence, and recruiters had reached out about Yahoo. And so that led to my departure of Sacramento and off to the Bay Area. I was in Santa Clara for a while in Sunnyvale, just working for Yahoo as an engineer, working on small business and web hosting. God, it's a terrible job. But
well, I did hear in your talk that you left Yahoo because you admitted that you were kind of a dick or a diva. So tell me about, how that working at Yahoo was and how, I guess, how they did things incorrectly. So what did they do wrong?
Yeah. To be fair, I feel like we were both wrong. I was right in some ways, but I was also kind of a jerk about it. So by no means was I helpful toward the problem. But they were doing things kind of ass backwards, and it was the typical bureaucracy kind of company. And as you can see now, Yahoo, I'm not wrong in saying that they did things probably not the greatest way. They blew a lot of deals. I mean, they could have been Google, but they weren't. It's just they messed up. But it's a lot of ways. I mean, I don't see them ever going away. It's hard to take down a giant that size. But they've had their big falls. Yeah, just Yahoo. My last day, I just didn't say anything. I just didn't go back. I just decided I wasn't going to work there anymore. So I went in on a Friday like normal, went to the normal update meeting and gave my progress. Like, oh, what's the status on this? And I'm like, oh, it's, probably, I'm working on it, And come Saturday, I went back to the office, went and unloaded all my desk into my car, went back home. And come Monday morning, they just saw an empty desk and they're like, oh, where's Dustin? I'm like, yeah, I'm not going back. They're like, what? They just said all these questions. They're like, you got to come back. I'm like, yeah, but the thing is, I don't have to come back. What are you going to do? I quit. I don't have to do an exit interview. I don't have to do anything. And I don't even really want to explain why. I was just so over it. And I don't recommend people leaving companies that way. But if you had to burn a bridge, I don't mind it being that one place. But I do have a lot of good friends that I made from that place. It was just super poor management. I think I had 13 people separating me and the CEO, which is a little too much on the top down.
I mean, even for those days, right? It was
only a company of maybe 10,000 at the time. And that's still too many. Google, on the other hand, was the complete opposite, which I guess was kind of a breath of fresh air. I was only 2 separated from the founders. So my boss reported to the CTO of the company, who was the same level as the founders, who reported to Eric Schmidt, who was the CEO. And that was a trip because you felt like, I rarely ever met with my boss. Once a quarter, we'd have like a progress update. Like, how are things going? And what are you working on? Like, all right, I'll tell you what I'm working on. And they can afford that kind of level of individuality. And there's a lot of trust in that kind of a company. But it had its goods and bads in that everyone had a say in the company, right? Or at least in general feature sets, or like what you're going to work on, or how things should work. And the downside is that everyone had a say in it. So it made meetings last extra long, and you had a bunch of prima donnas, myself included, just trying to get their, 2 cents in, and it would delay a project. And then it didn't matter for them because they had a search engine that made so much money, we could afford all this time lost. So I rarely made a difference there. I worked at one point in time on Gmail on like a role that I made up myself, which was like head prototyper, which meant I worked between designers and engineers. It was too tough to be an engineer there because of the environment was just, the environment was just a setup that I had no interest in trying to set up myself. It was beyond difficult. And I did enjoy aspects of design, and Google had really terrible design at the time. So I was help prototyping features with designers to prove to engineers that things are possible. Because they would often say like, oh, we can't build this. And like, yeah, you can. Like so many of their engineers were super lazy that they didn't want to build good design.
I was going to ask before you went on about Google when you quit Yahoo, did you have a plan to go anywhere? Did you say, hey, I'm just going to quit and figure it out? Or did you already have something in Google lined up?
I don't think anyone should quit without a real plan. I always had places to go. Is the company that I never talk about because it really wasn't worth my time. It was a company called IMVU or MView, which is like this 3D internet chat avatar, Second Life type of experience where you get to hang out virtually as a 3D being with other people. I was there for maybe 2.5 months, definitely not 3, because I didn't get my 3-month bonus. Neither did the guy who referred me. But my plan immediately after Yahoo was I had an offer on the table from that place. And it was right after that I heard back from LinkedIn and Google. So I interviewed with the two of them at the same time. LinkedIn sounded like the most boringest product on the planet. Super cool, like culture, and the people over there were really nice. And I think they love what they do. And I felt like I just wouldn't have been happy because I don't really care much for that product, especially then. I mean, even now, I just professional networks never really intrigued me. I mean, I have a LinkedIn now, but I don't care about LinkedIn. It just sounds so corporate that it's not fun. So I chose Google at that point.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you stayed at Google for another couple years.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you ultimately leave Google, even though you enjoy that culture and environment so much?
Yeah, I was working on the Buzz team, which was one of the many failed products. Not that it failed, but it did. This one kind of did fail in a bad way. They launch a lot of products and take them down, and there's learning experiences from those. But we worked on this thing called Google Buzz, which at the time was more or less a Twitter competitor. And I was a big early adopter of Twitter from 2007. And it was growing massively in popularity. It had that COVID exponential growth back then, as we know now. I realized midway into building Buzz, I'm like, God, why are we doing this? Like Twitter, this doesn't even compare. And I'm even the one like helping build it. And it just doesn't seem that appealing to me. It was going to be directly embedded and integrated into Gmail on day one. And that was our twisted way of saying on day one, we're going to have 100 million users. And which is kind of a cheat, saying, because that's how many Gmail users we had back then. The problem is we ran into, I left by that point. I left before it even launched for Twitter. And there was a security issue where every one of your contacts immediately became your friends, which was a huge privacy no-no, which meant that all you had to do is go look at your Google Buzz friends, and those were the people you're emailing. So you can kind of derive from that information, hey, I thought you weren't talking to your ex anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like they were one of your contacts,
Right.
or something like that. There was a weird thing that just immediately imported your contacts and they became your friends, and it exposed in a lot of ways who you're talking to.
So in that time at Google, you also published a book called JavaScript Design Patterns. How did you decide, I don't know if it was before Google or at Google, that you also wanted to publish a book?
Yeah, I was approached by a press, for better or for worse, to write a book. And I had this idea of JavaScript design patterns. I thought, the world could benefit. I think JavaScript was and always has been, for a language that's only 20 years old now, which, God, that's now old now. But for then was only 10 years old and still barely maturing and never really treated as a real language, can benefit from these, what were seen as mature practices from other mature languages like Java or Python that had, quote unquote design patterns. And so let's bring that into what was always treated as a hyper functional language, and very messy, and led to messy websites. This was a way to bring that maturity to JavaScript. And so it also did take a lot of research. I pulled a lot of these patterns from the original Gang of Four book, where that was written in the mid to late 90s, I think, and that was all for Java. It was really hard to write for them because I got almost 2 chapters in and sent those in as my first draft. And they said, you need to rewrite this. You can't be writing all these jokes and these silly puns. And the kind of humor that I had in my head was it made the book readable. And so I had to turn around and write it their way. And it led me to just hate writing, for someone who still likes to write and enjoyed thought pieces and opinion writing and also bad jokes. So for something like JavaScript design patterns, they thought there was no place for that. And so it led to me bringing in a co-author who ultimately ended up writing a lot more of the book than I did. It was more than likely a 25-75 split. And I can't thank him enough. His name is Ross Harms. And we were at one point roommates, and who stepped up big time. And we were coworkers at Yahoo. So we weren't working together at the time we wrote the book. But that would have never happened had he not came in.
After Google, you joined Twitter, and you were employee number 40 at Twitter when you joined. Mm-hmm. What did Twitter look like then when it was so early on?
Yeah. On paper, I was around 40, 42. What it meant for joining, I was around number 30, as far as how many people were in the actual office. It was cool. I mean, imagine 30 people. That's how big classrooms are, right? If you can remember high school or grade school or whatever, some college classes, 30. You can picture in your mind 30 people. And what that meant was, at any given day, there was about 25 people in the office or so. When we went to do coffee runs, that literally meant half the company was gone during a break hour or something. And you got to work on just making a difference. It was one product as opposed to Google, we had 100 products. Or Yahoo had 100 different properties like sports, finance, small business, horoscopes, news, search, all these things. It was just Twitter. And I mean, in a lot of ways, you didn't need a big team, and you really still don't. And this was pre-marketing, pre-business development, being a full-fledged team. HR was 1 or 2 people. The operations team was 3 guys in a room with no fans. Engineering was still half the company, but that was really only 15 of us. God, it was so much fun. And you would just ship constantly, new product every day, every week. Built so many cool things there that I felt like I actually did make a big difference there. I probably made the biggest difference at Twitter than any other company, at least prior to that, maybe a couple even after. But it was super cool. I got to build the tweet and the follow button, as we all know it. I was a key member of the 2010 new Twitter relaunch, I suppose, the new twitter.com. We pushed out a bunch of new features. I built the new autocomplete, the infinite scroll, the embedded media, the inline pictures, and it made Twitter, as we all know now, these are all like standard, pretty normal features now. Yeah. But back then they were pretty groundbreaking. It was a lot of fun.
So while you were doing all this at Twitter, shipping all these products, you decided, hey, I want to write another book. And so you wrote another book about flashes and lighting. And so how did that come about?
Like why are we here today? Why are we doing a podcast? Like anyone, you grow an interest. You're like, I want to get into this interest of mine. And a little bit has to do with some of the gadgets. I feel like anyone that has a mild interest in gadgets, you start playing around with them and you do stuff with them. What I'm looking at here on the set is like a pretty legitimate podcast setup with a good mixer, an expensive laptop, and I'm sure these mics weren't cheap. So I started getting into cameras and lenses and strobes and lighting setups, and then the tech behind it, or the science behind it, how light travels, how depth of field works, how does aperture work mathematically, how does it relate to the inverse square law. These were all really cool things that I thought, like, for someone who doesn't have a lot of original thought, like being original is one of the hardest things on the planet. So this allowed me to hack that, so to speak, how to fake being original by solving it technically. So I was taking great pictures, technically speaking, and I had to try really, really hard to make something look great or beautiful. I think in that year, I started that 365 project. I probably got about 3 to 5 great photos out of that whole year that I can remember that like meant something that I was proud of. And even though every picture took a lot of work and effort, they were, scientifically done in my head. To me, I was like, I wasn't proud of them because I was doing them based on science as opposed to art and having like, an artistic sense. I would look at all these photos, even that I took, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, this picture is great. I really love what you did with this and that." And I'm like, that was by chance, and that was because I took 50 frames, and this was the best frame, where the lighting looked the best on that one. And it was really hard to go out there with something in mind. I would go out there with an empty mind, shoot stuff, like throw paint at a wall, so to speak, and then pick the one that had the best paint on it, and be like, "Yeah, I took this. This is totally my idea."
And I don't think you would have been able to publish that book if you didn't have such a big Flickr following. I think you've had a Flickr account since it was as early as 2005.
Yeah,
and
good old Flickr.
And you've been uploading photos, and I think your profile was one of the big ones. I think to this day it had 30 million photo views.
Yeah, I was big on Flickr. That's like being big on TikTok now, or being, I don't know, like one of the top people on Instagram, although you can't really compare them. I mean, comparing Instagram to Flickr at this point. So, but it was cool. I was getting like, I had a couple number ones of the day throughout that year. I was consistently in the top 100 daily with my photos. I grew a pretty large following. It was pretty strange. And it was all just because I was giving away free information. And none of it was out of like, there was no gain in my head it was just me learning and me putting it online. And I never had an intention of selling it. It was just because it was all a learning process for me. And I don't know why the lighting and photography community kept so many secrets to themselves. Like you see all these great photographs, and to them it was like, oh, the magician never reveals its secrets. I'm like, that's so dumb. Like, how do you learn this stuff without paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for these lighting workshops, which I always thought were ripoffs, buying a DVD for $600. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start off shooting what I know how to do, post all my mistakes, and show exactly how I did it. Put, how many feet away this light was from the subject, at what light power, using what lighting modifier, softbox, umbrella, etc., and what were my camera settings. And it was literally an open book, which I thought was I wish that existed before I had done it.
And if anything, that book was just an extension of your Flickr, because I'm sure you were doing something like that anyway.
It was, it took a little more effort because I was a little burned out by the time the book came out. So I was so done with the 365, which took so much time. I was like, all right, now time for another book, which I already said I was never going to do again. I went in and instead of having my friends be in the book, not that I didn't want my friend, I wanted like good looking people. So I went to go hire models, like actual people who like having their photo taken versus like dragging my friends along who are constantly like, look, Dustin, I don't want to be your testing subject again for your learning process and whatever. And it turned out good, I think. Good enough. You always have your own self-critiques and what could have been better, but at the end of the day, a book happened and it exists in history and it's out there.
Do we think we'll get a third book from you?
No. I hope not. Unless it's memoirs of... No. And even then, I'm going to have someone else write it.
Sure. So you worked at Twitter, I think, for almost 4 years, 2009 to 2011. Mm-hmm. And after Twitter, you jumped over to Medium, which I think you co-founded with someone at Twitter. So how did that come about?
Yeah, I was a founding engineer on Medium. I went to the Obvious Corp, which was dubbed Obvious 2.0 because Twitter was an obvious company. Obvious was this overarching like thing or entity. I don't know if it was an LLC or C Corp or just some sort of governing body of a company. You'd have to look that up. But that had started Odeo, which was a podcasting company. They pivoted into Twitter. They were basically going under. This is around the time iTunes or Apple launched in-app podcasting within iTunes, which was just, I don't know, nearly taking down something like Odeo. So they had to pivot, and then it started Twitter. So Ev, I won't get into the politics of that. There's a book about it. Don't bother reading it. I'm a big fan of Ev and a lot of his ideas. And he departed Twitter for reasons and started Obvious 2.0 along with, I believe, some partners that came along from Twitter. There was Bizstone. There was Goldman. He had some ideas. He pitched me and he pitched others to come join along. It was somewhat maybe a conflict of interest for me to join because I was coming from Twitter. So I had to have this long back and forth between Dick Costello and Ev. I'm like, look, this is my choice. I'm not like Ev's not pulling my arm. Just let me do this. I went there for this other idea. I won't talk about that other idea, but we also tried some other things. And about 6 months in is when the idea for Medium came about. And so I started that along with others. It wasn't my idea. I'm not by no means claiming that. But I felt lucky enough to have been part of it and to have been part of that original engineering team that was part of the launch. And I built the editor at the time, which was really cool, I think. It's since been replaced, as with many technologies, and you improve them and make them better. But it made for a really cool writing experience. I felt like it was groundbreaking then. Now we all maybe, I don't know, depend on your stance, take it for granted. But, we were always used to these big like text editors like Microsoft Word or the built-in rich text editor that you get with like WordPress or whatever. There was a big competitor called TinyMCE, which was a library to help make the writing experience like this full-blown thing or whatever. And we realized, for writing, you don't really need all those things. You need a cursor and you need to be able to type And sometimes you need a header, sometimes you need to bold something, and eventually sometimes you need a picture or a list. And like that was really it. And you don't need to see all the controls all the time. It was that simplicity that we felt made it easy. And it kind of played into like, I think the original thought was it was going to be sort of like something that you write that it was not long form, but longer than Twitter, which was at the time 140 characters, which since graduated to like 280. But it was, so it was dubbed Medium. Whether or not we had medium.com at the time or not, I'm not sure if we did, but when you have resources like Ev, you can make it happen. When you're a founder of Twitter and you have liquid cash, I'm pretty sure you can get the domains you want.
So that's interesting. I didn't realize that Medium was called that because it wasn't meant for short or long form writing. In that case, I guess I've completely misused that platform when I documented my first 100-mile race with over like 23,000 words on Medium.
And well, no. I mean, you launch with an idea, but it doesn't mean it morphs into other things. I know another leading idea pushed or thought, pushed by Ev in his thought toward what Medium can be. It could be the place. It could be the new medium and where you get your information. I won't touch on it too much because he did have this other idea, and I felt like parts of it bled into Medium. Like imagine building a new internet, and that was like a leading concept or a thing that if you could believe that, what would it look like? What if the internet in a good way was privatized? Like I said, in a good way. Like what if Apple owned the internet? And I know that sounds bad, or any company, even if you think that they're good. Just imagine the internet being privatized and a private company owning it. They would make the experience amazing, and it would be like the App Store. There's a lot of great apps in the App Store versus they're moderated, so to speak, and they have design guidelines and they have to get approved. Imagine if the raw internet behaved the same way. Now, obviously, this is looking at the world in a very optimistic light and assuming all things could be great. And now, no, I don't think the internet should actually work that way. I think for the better, it's open, and we do have a lot of crappy websites out there, and there are a lot of scams, and there are not good things on the internet. But just imagine as a user what the internet would look like. It was kind of cool, and that kind of trickled into some of the idealisms of Medium. Just what if Medium became the place where you got all your content, but it was just a website, right? So it wasn't the full-blown internet. Yeah. It wasn't a browser owned by a company over a new protocol that wasn't HTTP or something like that. So anyway.
Interesting. So the idea was sort of improving the World Wide Web user experience by creating some sort of new standard that was forced upon by the privatization of internet.
Yeah, okay. But yeah. And mind you, by no means I don't think Ev was... That sounds like an evil idea. But, sometimes you got to look at good intentions and what good can come out of them.
Right. I mean, the most crazy radical ideas are the ones that at first seem crazy and ridiculous. Like, for example, Airbnb that end up actually working out really well. So yeah, you never know.
Yeah. Who is suffering pretty hard right now.
I bet. So after Medium, this is like, I don't know how many companies now, you became a co-founder of Mix. So yeah, how did that transition happen?
Yeah, there was one other company before that. Okay. It was Change.org, which is an amazing company. They're a B Corp. And I didn't last long enough for my own reason. I didn't want to stick around. I was a chief front-end architect at that company, switching them from one major piece of technology to another that is, as we know, is Node.js. And they were on this platform called Ruby on Rails, which is nothing wrong with that. But I feel like whatever. I won't get into it, but I left that company. And yeah, ultimately I had a call from a buddy of mine who had connections with Garrett Camp to check out Expa. And I was like, no, I'm going to do this other thing. And I went along with change.org and then left. And I was like, I called him back. I'm like, hey, so about that thing, you know. That Expa is I don't know if it's changed since, but at the time, I can only speak to it at that time because I haven't followed or kept along what they've been doing or their new initiatives. But it was a startup studio that helped create and foster internal ideas, you know, within, and companies can be born out of them. So rather than being like a traditional, like a Y Combinator sort of thing, where they go invest in outside things and bring them in, the idea, so you join the company in the beginning and then ideas are born out of it. And then ideally those people can become founders of those ideas and move on. So we had started one. It didn't last longer than a year. It was called Open Lex, which I believe has been shut down since. And we started this other thing called Mix. And that was a lot of fun. And that really lent itself towards my background in social networks and rich internet experiences, just creating this type of experience to get all your content. It's like a mix between Twitter and Medium and Gmail, sort of all combined, and my love for writing experiences and consuming content on the internet. You know, and with Twitter, there's a lot of noise to the signal ratio, and you follow people, and it was just bizarre. And it's, you know, you go all in. With Mix, you can follow the aspects of people that you like about them. That sounds bad. You can like the things that you like about them and ignore the other thing. What that meant was, like, as an example, I have those two books. I wrote about JavaScript and I wrote about photography. Two very, very different things to other people. In my mind, I see them very similar. There's a lot of similarity between the simplicity of JavaScript and the patterns within it and the expressiveness of it to a camera lens and the lighting and aspects of it. It's like a simple machine. A camera is a very simple machine. This is the way I treated JavaScript in my programming. That's, you know what, I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole talk. But some people see them as very different, which I understand. You want to be able to follow those things. So I can create a photography mix and I can create a JavaScript mix or a cooking mix or a DJ mix or whatever. My love of beer or running, and it's all running news or whatever. You can create these mixes, and it was like a twist on that and on StumbleUpon, which was one of Garrett's previous companies. If anyone remembers StumbleUpon, you could follow those and you can comment on them and you could have discussions on them. It was like that, like having a bookmarks list, like Delicious, if no one remembers that. Pinterest, sure. You can follow a Pinterest board. So I remember that Pinterest giving inspiration to us in that we were trying to think of that verb to noun thing, like how you pin something to a board. And we're like, how do you mix something to a database record? We're like, what do we call it? We just mix it. You know, how you tweet a tweet. That's a noun and a verb. How to Google something. But yeah, so Mix was that. And it's still live today. You can get it in the App Store, the Play Store, and it's mix.com. And it's worth checking out, I think. I don't know. I have a lot of good friends still working on it, but I did leave that. It sounds like I just leave everything. But yeah.
Maybe there is something to leaving, you know, all these different companies is maybe it's just you have all these opportunities presented to you. So after Mix,
Sure.
decided to go your own route, and you decided, hey, I want to, find a way to connect models with booking agents. So how did that whole idea come about?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll get into that. I just want to make this clear that it doesn't sound like I'm just jumping, or that, for someone who has this huge respect for athletes like Kobe Bryant, who was we call them lifers. And I don't know if anyone else who knows Tony Gwynn, who was a Padre for life, the San Diego Padres baseball player. Those were my idols. And for those reasons, and my grandpa, who was an insurance agent for his whole life, outside of being in the military for a couple early years and fought in Korea. After that, it was just insurance, forever, as long as I've known him. And there's something respectable about that. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be loyal to a company to still not believe that you're part of that same spirit. I'm not just trying to get from one place to the other. It's never been about money in that sense. I just want to do great things for people and build great products. And I'm a firm believer that people don't leave companies. They leave their managers or their bosses, or sometimes their coworkers or whatever. And, and for what it's worth, you don't need a real reason. If you think there's something better where you can make a bigger impact on the world, then do it. I've been accused of being a quitter, and that's never been the case. It's just trying to make things better. So anyway, leading into agent now, so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do my own company. So if I quit, quote unquote quit, I'm quitting on myself, and I'm not letting anyone down. And I don't see that happening, at least anytime soon. So we've been a company now for almost 5 years. I guess this December, so 4.5 years. And it's not almost 5, it's 4.5. And it was inspired from being a photographer and working with talent, specifically models, what that booking experience was like. So I went to look at a couple of agencies, and I realized that's too much money for me to spend. Like, these are like amazing models, and this is just for my dorky little book that I'm going to put on Amazon. So I went to Model Mayhem, and I put out a casting call, and I got about 20 bites, and basically at the end of it, only 12 of them really showed up on their days that they were supposed to. And then payment became a hassle. Yeah, just not the ideal experience, like gathering them around, and you're left with like this open-ended inbox and no real guarantees of any of these people showing up or saying who they were or looking like what they actually look like. So that started Agent. It launched as a platform for these 4 pillars of creatives, which were models, photographers, stylists, and makeup artists. Very fashion oriented. That didn't work out because everyone thought they were the talent. Mm-hmm. Everyone wanted to be the one that got booked. So even though anyone could book anyone, everyone wanted to be the one that got booked. So there were no actual clients. So I was thinking like, if you're a model, you might want to book a photographer. But if you're a photographer, you want to be the one that's booked. So you're thinking like, the model should hire me or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, then there's no business and trade for print. Then you're just losing money. So we cut off the other 3 pillars, focused on models, and then shifted our marketing towards just straight up clients, people who book models. Since then, we saw an uptick. And now, we do have plans to go into other tiers like acting or musicians, or I know we're getting into influencers at this point. Now, because of the times, a lot of these in-person jobs are happening a lot less. And so brands are seeking other ways to book talent that doesn't involve working with them in person, where you have to work directly with a makeup artist or someone touching your face or your hair or like pinning clothes to you and, doing wardrobe stuff. I feel like in a lot of ways, you may not be interested in what I'm doing, but which understandably so, because I could get into the details of that. So maybe I'll switch my focus to just the business aspect, or starting a startup is in a lot of ways more translatable to people, because no matter what your idea, you could care less about what we actually do as a business. the first thing you want to do is start, which I feel like that's the hump number one. How do you start a startup? Well, you start. And I think so many people get hung up on that. And people pretend that they have these ideas. You know, if you don't even start, you won't even know if you fail or succeed because you won't even start. So I know that's trite and it's very like, you know, banging that same old drum that they've probably heard before, but you do have to start. And it doesn't have to be like with a big bang. It could be a side project. I'm a huge fan of starting side projects while you have your other job. There's nothing those companies can do about that. I mean, everyone should be able to have a hobby. And then it's putting together ideas and what you want to work on. If you just want to go into business for yourself, then at least pick a good idea. Some people are obsessed with just business and it doesn't matter what the idea is. If that's your thing, that's cool. I would recommend it being something that is a general area that you have interest in. You don't have to be an expert in or have any expertise, just an interest in it. Sometimes the more you know, it can be, I don't know, worse. It's that naivete. It's that naiveness that sometimes helps because the less you know, you're not shutting down those ideas earlier on. I have to admit, there's a lot of things that I did not know about booking that I'm glad I didn't know because I may not have started this business.
Sure. I mean, just not being in that industry, you're not attached to a framework of how things should be done. Right?
Mm-hmm. And it allows you to mix it up.
Yeah.
And you break the mold. And it's a fresh new way of looking at stuff that could be good for people. They're like, yeah, this is actually a great way for this to work.
So I know you didn't have the typical startup journey because although, you know, you have ideas, you're also very well connected with people in that space. So did that make it easier to get funding for your startup, or did you have to work just as hard as, you know, other people to raise that money?
I know people talk about being connected, but I don't know how I was connected. You just meet people and over time keep good connections. It's still hard. I guess no matter what, it's still hard. If you have a good idea, just work on it. And if you believe in it and you really think it's going to work, then stick with it. Keep it as a side project for as long as you can. I raised money for this company on a pitch deck, so I didn't have any product at all. And that's good and bad, but it's bad in the sense that, well, you're going to give up a little more equity when there's zero product to begin with because it's more of a risk. But on the other hand, you do benefit from it just being an actual idea because then when there's a product, then they can scrutinize it more and they're going to expect more or whatever, versus selling an idea is a lot easier because it doesn't exist. So it's an idea.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, a pitch deck is just a PowerPoint presentation that you present to someone and ask for money for.
Yeah. Preferably you get to pitch it in front of them, but you do have to get used to the idea that you might not be there. I've never landed cash because of an email with the pitch deck in it. Maybe it's just not my strength, or I don't know if it was the deck, but anytime I actually met in person, the likelihood of getting funds was like 1,000% higher. Like realistically speaking, it would happen either at a bar or coffee shop or whatever, and you can like show it on your computer or whatever and just talk about it. And they connect with you because in so many ways, they're not just investing in the idea. Like it's when something's that early from the beginning, they're not really investing in the idea. They're investing in you. They're investing in who the company is. They need to believe in you because you can have the best idea. It doesn't really matter who it is. If you're not someone that they believe in, why bother? So as long as it's half decent, or if they just see how much you believe in it, you know, then that's sometimes good enough. I feel like I generally had a good track record in technology, in the platforms that I've contributed to, the people I've worked with, that the idea was a lot less important. So it is a lot how you present it though, and how much you believe in it. And if you show that rigor, that early pre-seed and angel investors are looking for. Yeah.
Right. So I guess it was a little easier for you to get that in-person meeting just because you had that sort of
San Francisco.
Yeah.
It's a small town. Yeah, it's a small area, and everyone is connected in one way or another. So you get some introductions, and you
Right.
meet with some people.
So I mean, honestly, if people want VC money, should they move to the Bay Area? Is it just that much easier to get connected?
Oh man, no, no. There's plenty here. There's a lot. I mean, LA now is a pretty good hotbed, and there's probably like another 10 to 20 cities as well. New York, Seattle, Denver, Austin. They're all over the place. That's just a couple. LA though is I'm not even talking about the traditional places like over by Venice and whatnot. Like there's plenty downtown and whatever, but you should be able to drive somewhere and meet with someone and just get the meeting, do the pitch deck, make the pitch deck, but that doesn't have to look brilliant by any means. It's the words in your email that are alongside your pitch deck that can go a lot more way, and who you know, not to turn it into like it's a who you know game, but they know you're friends with so-and-so or whatever, and talk about your background. They're going to believe and invest in you.
So how did you co-found Agent with your wife, Ashley, and how does that dynamic work? It's pretty interesting and unique to have, two co-founders be husband and wife.
Oh, man. Well, we've been together now for, I guess that's 7.5 years. Not 8, not almost 8. That was interesting. She thought I was crazy. She thought, like, why are you doing, is this a good time for you to be doing this? Like, I don't know, maybe in hindsight it wasn't. I did take another interview for one more company. It was Snapchat. And I flew down here. I was still in San Francisco. I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just, and this is after Mix. Like, I'll do one. Maybe I'll just do this big company thing again. It could maybe be something. I'm not really sure. The interview was very strange. It happened on Halloween, which was weird in and of itself. A ghost company on Halloween. And everyone was dressed up. And I'm like there in professional, whatever, like I was wearing a tie. So that's it. Just a tie.
Tie around your t-shirt?
Yeah. And I've got these like young 20-year-olds who are really smart, but just did not know how to interview and did the classic like brain teaser type of questions. I'm like, this is not how work gets done. And, interviews should not be done purely on a whiteboard. And this is not how problems are solved. But they don't even know that, like, and you can't correct someone that's interviewing you. It's a very strange place to be. And then I interviewed with their engineering director. That was nice. He was smart and he was mature in the ways that a lot of other ones were very immature. I didn't know their product like inside and out. I just didn't. I don't know. And they expect you, like anyone who works there, how to know exactly how it works. I think I got how their stories, when they disappear, like I got that wrong or something. I was like, I thought they disappear after 24. It's like, no, not when you send it to someone. It's when it was anyway, I can nitpick that interview to death, but ultimately it was not a fit. I did like coming to LA. So I decided even after, whether or not this happens or not, I'm moving to LA anyway. And so we agreed, not a fit, but I'm moving to LA anyway. And we started Agent together. It's been a fun up and down ride, long nights and just a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was LA chosen for Agent, or did Agent just happen to fit very well with the LA, sort of
a little
vibe?
Yeah, a little of both. I felt like, LA is really cool in a good way. You can knock it all you want and how fake Hollywood is or whatever. It all fit together. So right timing. I enjoyed coming down for that brief visit. Agent needed to be down here anyway. It didn't make sense in San Francisco. Now we have investors all over the country.
And I think the story was you named your startup after your son.
That's correct. Yeah. Agent is 9 years old. Agent, the company, is almost 5. Sorry, 4.5.
So yeah, now is where we can get back into the running. So while
Okay.
while in the midst of starting your company, getting product rolled out, trying to grow your user base, roll out new features, you decided to start running again. I guess what prompted that? What was the spark?
I don't know. It's so hard. I have no other real reason that isn't outside of the same story of Forrest Gump, where he just felt like Ruddig. And I felt like it was like a similar moment of like probably sitting there on my doorstep, going out for a walk. And actually, in a lot of ways, it was Ashley. She was doing a lot of yoga and a lot of, if you're familiar with that feature on your Apple Watch, actually, the 3 rings.
Yeah.
She was really big on quote unquote closing her rings. And I saw that, and there was a competitive aspect to it. Not that I wanted to beat Ashley in that sense, but it was seeing her do that. And then the rings become the thing you compete against. And it was like, God, she can do it. And not to say that, oh, she can do it, then I can do it. No, it wasn't that by any means. It was watching her do something that was both healthy, and that was part of this like spirit of like doing something good with your body. And like, man, you know what? I really should do something. So it started off with like just walking and then jogging. And I was like closing my rings, and it turned into a streak. Something about streaks that I have in my past, that is, whether it's like 365 days of photos or 365 days of pushing code to GitHub. So I was like, I'll start closing my rings. That's hard to maintain running wise. It leads to burnout pretty easily with something that physically exerts energy. So then I learned early on, like, I need rest. But it doesn't mean I'll stop running.
And I think I've noticed that when you started writing your JavaScript book, when you started your photo project, and now running, it seems like these happen during periods of time when you're happy with the work. So I think you overall liked your environment and work at Google. You liked the environment at Twitter. And I'm sure you enjoy your time at Agent. And I think these are what sparks kind of moments where you can reflect on hobbies, your health, and just other aspects of your life. And maybe that's the pattern that at least I'm getting from.
Yeah, I think now I don't see myself giving up running again. It's surprising that I stopped doing it for 17 and a half years or so. I don't know what it would have been like. I mean, I guess it's good that it happened. I mean, there was a reason I stopped, and I just focused solely on technology and startups and everything else in business. But now I can't imagine stopping again because there's a different reason. Back then it was purely competitive to be in college, and I wanted to be great and the fastest and everything else. I feel like I had lesser running friends in college, aside from just being teammates with them. But like now I realize a lot more people run for different reasons. A great way to stay social and keep in touch. And in a lot of ways, that's our entire social life is running.
Exactly.
Showing up to blacklists or running with your training partners or the Pasadena Parrots.
Yeah, one day that'll be something. So what is your like running looking like for you these days? You went from 0 to 100 real fast. At least from my perspective, when I first started running with you, you're still getting into it. This guy like just popped up on Strava and started liking all my activities and commenting on my posts, and now you went from never having run a marathon to running 240 something marathons consistently.
Yeah, sorry if I went hard on the kudos. I wonder if people think I'm just bothering them too much. And like, this is social media. What's different? It's like Twitter. It's just, why can't I just comment on all your posts? Right. So yeah, running's looking fine. And I'm trying to get fast. And to be honest, I'm still not even really doing it for health reasons. I guess that's a side benefit, is feeling healthy. And running is good for you in a lot of ways. It's still competitive, at least many aspects of it. I enjoy distance running. I would like to get back to that mid-distance but I did finally grow a much larger love for long distance, much more than I used to. I don't feel like I'm as good as it. I do think I'm a better miler or half miler, but I like running marathons much more. So categorically speaking, I think I'm a better miler.
I think I saw you go out and race a mile maybe a few months ago. And you ran, was it around a 4:30 or something?
Yeah, I ran a 4:34 and I got nicked in the end for second place.
Oof.
I felt like I got boxed in with like 50 yards to go, and then there was a biker that I had to slow down. And it, you know, in that kick, if you slow down, it breaks everything. It breaks you mentally. It breaks everything. And I lost by about a yard.
Wow.
So, but I won my age group, whatever. I wanted to win though. I hate these quote unquote age group wins. I want to like win a real race eventually. Not just like, oh, I won my division or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, then my question is, what do you get out of winning? You could win by registering, well, not these days, but, you know, if you register for a small YMCA 5K, you could have won that, right?
Yeah, and I'll beat the crap out of these 12-year-olds. And they're like, it's like dunking on a child or something.
Yeah.
And I don't want to win that way. I don't even know what it is. Because, you know, once it happens, there'll still be that emptiness. Not that I'm empty or... That sounds sad, but I don't know. I was very happy with the time of it and whatnot. It just didn't happen that day.
All right, well, that has been a great long episode. You can find Dustin on Instagram at Povero and on Strava and on Twitter as well at DED, because he was employee number 40 something. He gets that special little Twitter handle. And with that, thanks, Dustin.
Right on. Thanks, Michael.